with which you disagree, please let us know by writing to us at comments@ksco.com.
This is DBS Radio Network.
Oh, yeah, you got it. You have got it.
I think I got it.
You're listening to Dave Allen, the Nighthawk.
And Guinea.
And Kelly Powers, too.
The Nighthawk. Yeah, the Nighthawk. Don't touch that dial. You are listening on KSCO, Santa Cruz. Dive into the unexplained and downright controversial. Guinea controversial, Guinea and Kelly. Powers will be your guide. Nighthawk. Resurrected on CBS Radio.
Welcome to the Nighthawk. I'm Guinea.
And I'm Kelly Powers. Welcome to the Nighthawk.
And we're on KSCO. Live.
We are live.
So, Miss Kelly, tell me about your week.
Well, I got into the studio and had to commit mass murder.
Whoa.
We had a complete invasion of ants.
The ants.
So I think I just murdered a lot of ants.
Well,
so, how are you? How are you?
Very zen of you.
Yeah.
I am fabulous.
What's new?
It's Thursday. On Tuesday, I thought it was Thursday.
Yes.
So I'm back in here on my Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah, we had a phone call with our guest tonight, and he's like, it's Wednesday. And I'm like, no, it's Tuesday. So I think we all were a little bit confused on what date it was.
Well, he's in the future, so...
He is in the future.
He was in New Jersey when we were talking to him, and it was already Wednesday for him.
It was Wednesday.
So, are you going to introduce who we have up for tonight
Yes.
for our episode of... Scary.
We have some spooky, scary stuff coming. We have Robert Damon Schneck, and he is a historian of all things strange. So you can find him on Facebook, and if you type in "historian of the strange," you'll find him. So he thinks that American history is more than just what you read in your high school textbooks. There is wild and weird side to the American past, filled with strange creatures, bizarre happenings, and fantastical creatures. So he's a researcher and writer. He has spent more than a decade, probably more than a decade now, because when this was written, he spent a very long time devoted to the forgotten, weird, grotesque, and mysterious gems of American history, like, get this, the
What?
man who preached good health through blood drinking.
That sounds like something I've heard a lot of.
You know, I saw a special on, I think it was YouTube or something like that, where there was this guy in... where was he? He was in New Orleans, and he was like, I'm a vampire and I drink blood. And I don't know how good that is for anybody, but
Isn't that adrenochrome?
I don't know.
That's what they say. Is it still adrenochrome if it comes from
No,
adults?
because adrenochrome comes from
the youth.
Well, it comes from fear. So in order to develop the adrenochrome in the blood, there has to be immense fear that happens. So they say when somebody is being murdered. So that's where that comes in.
Okay. I don't know anything about adrenochrome.
Well,
I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, I think we probably have our guest. Robert is calling in. Let's see if we can get him on the line.
Robert, welcome to... Yes. How are you this evening? Welcome to the Nighthawk.
I'm good, thank you, and I'm glad to be back after 25 years.
Yes, I want to tell everybody. So, do you go by Robert? I should have asked you that like a while ago, and I apologize for that.
That's Robert's fine.
Okay, so Robert was one of our original guests on Dave Allen's The Nighthawk, and we've been diving through all the archives and listening to all these wonderful episodes that he had. And actually, just for the listeners, Robert is a very humble man. You know, I wanted to send him the episode, and he's like, oh my gosh, I will never listen to myself ever, so don't even bother. But I want to tell you, the episode that you had with Dave Allen was one of my favorite, because it was very candid, it was honest, and it was one of my favorites. So thank you for coming on.
And Kelly likes the scary.
Oh, good. I've got a lot of scary and a lot of strange and some disgusting. In fact, a fair amount of disgusting. But I think we'll have lots to talk about.
I like it all.
Sounds amazing.
So I gave a little bit of an introduction to you. I didn't get a chance to talk about your books yet, but you know, I know that one of your books inspired the movie Bye Bye Man, right?
Yes, it did. It was actually the last story in the book that was originally titled The President's Vampire.
Okay.
When Penguin re-released it to coincide with the movie release, they re-released it as the Bye Bye Man, which makes sense, you know, from a marketing point of view. But it was interesting. That has turned out to be the most popular thing I've ever written, and yet I first of all came within an inch of not including it in the book.
How funny!
And I've never really considered it my story, because a friend of mine, it happened to a friend of mine, and he used to tell it at Halloween parties year after year after year. And the first time I heard it, it was one of maybe one or two stories that someone has ever told me that genuinely gave me the chills.
Okay.
And still bothered me the next morning when I woke up. So it was a genuinely creepy story, and I asked him to retell it to me in a way that was as close to how he remembered it happening, with no embroidery, no storytelling,
no fluff.
No fluff, right?
No embellishment.
Right, and that's what I asked him to do, and that's very close to what appears in the book. Although I throw in a lot of research and, you know, background material, trying to check to see if certain things happened when he said they might have, things like that. And the story, I'm not what you'd call a great marketer, but when the book came out and I realized that so many people liked that story, I started telling it in a way that that people found intriguing. I would not say the name of the ghoul, the monster in the story, which of course is the Bye Bye Man, because thinking about him is supposed to attract him. So I never mentioned him during the interviews, and that really interested people. I ended up doing an episode of Coast to Coast, and somebody in Hollywood heard me tell the story, and they called me the next day.
Wow.
Can you imagine things like that actually happen?
Yes.
It does. You know, you never know who's listening, you know.
No.
I am always fascinated when I hear. I want to give a shout out to our friend JD, who is actually a local listener in Santa Cruz. We heard last week that he has been listening to the Nighthawk. So hello, JD. Thank you for listening. So yes, this is how things work. We're so blessed to have radio waves still, you know, flying through the air and connecting people.
Entertaining
the
world.
So yeah, and it's funny too, because the man who called me, his name is David Pryor. He made some really bad horror movies, but he also made the best documentary on the Zodiac Killer that I've ever seen.
I'll have to watch that one because that gets into some topics that I'm really interested in. And I know, you get into some stuff that would be considered, I guess, kind of like folklore, but then also you have a real knack on getting into humans and the monster inside of us.
Well, it's funny because I consider a lot of what I write to be essentially folklore. And even things like, I'll give you an example. In my last book, Mrs. Wakeman versus the Antichrist, I retell one of the most famous of all Bigfoot stories, which is Ape Canyon.
Okay.
Now, I'd imagine most people who know anything about Bigfoot remember the story of Ape Canyon, which is a man named Fred Beck and some of his relatives were mining in a place that is now called Ape Canyon up near Mount St. Helens. They built a log cabin, and they saw what sounds like a Bigfoot one night, and they took a shot at him, and later that night they were attacked by these Bigfoot that were throwing rocks at the cabin and tried opening the door and really seemed interested in killing the miners inside. And then the miners escaped, and they shot one more on their way out, and that's more or less the story that appears in most Bigfoot books.
Yeah.
But if you read the pamphlet that Fred Beck's son Raymond put out called "I Fought the Ape Men of Mount St. Helens, Washington," you realize that there is a lot more to the story than just that. First of all, the miners were spiritualists, and they didn't just go prospecting. They summoned spirits to help lead them to gold mines, and in fact, they summoned one called the Great Spirit, who took the form of a Native American, and he fired a phantom arrow into the air, and they followed it for days. And when the phantom arrow landed, that's where they began to dig. And the name of their mine, which escapes me right now, was actually the name of one of the spirits that they contacted when they were mining. So right off the bat, we're talking about an unusual bunch of men.
Yeah.
And then when they they did something wrong. They cursed the spirit when they were following the arrow, because it went on they followed it for hours and hours and hours, and one of them finally said something like, "Oh, this is ridiculous. There's nothing to this." And that's when the arrow fell. But they also got a vision of a door full of treasure closing, which they took to mean that they weren't going to get the treasure, but they figured they might as well try mining anyway. So they began to mine, and they set up their cabin. And as they were doing this thing, that they were bringing ore down to, I forget the name of the local city where they lived, but they were taking ore down there, and they had it assayed. That is to say that they had it measured for its gold content,
right.
And it really looked like they were on the verge of finding a vein of gold. It looked very promising. And that's when the Bigfoot attack took place. Now, all of that might sound, that's interesting, that's coincidental, but if you look at the history of magical treasure hunting in the United States and Europe, there is this long history of, first, if you speak while the spirit is showing you where the gold is, it breaks the spell and you'll lose the gold.
There's actually a lot of lore in our area. We have, if you're okay with it, we have a caller that's calling in that has some information about the Zodiac Killer. Are you interested in taking that?
Sure.
And we'll get back to your story.
Sure thing.
Oh, say, thank you. Hello, my friend.
Hi, caller. What's your name and where are you from?
My name is Samuel from Scotts Valley.
Hi, Samuel. Thanks for calling.
Yes, and I've heard this on Coast to Coast. So, the Zodiac Killer, he said in his letters, his name was Samuel Kaczynski, the Zodiac Killer. Theodore Kaczynski, I am the Zodiac Killer, and all those letters were in his confession, and that's why the FBI arrested him, because of his confession.
All right.
Oh, well, I never heard that. That's very interesting, though.
Well, think about it, my friend. Theodore Kaczynski, I am the Zodiac Killer, and it was one letter that was off that wasn't in there, but all the rest were.
Interesting.
How old would Kaczynski have been when the Lake Herman Road shootings took place?
My God, probably like, he was a professor at Berkeley, Cal Berkeley, 37 years old. He was a phenom, and he used a .22 revolver, like a .22 9-shot revolver. And that's why they have him in that super prison down in Nevada, he's like 22 stories down in concrete.
I think he passed June 10th of 2023.
Did he?
Yeah, that's what.
Thank God.
That's what Wikipedia is saying. So we're finally not paying to house this psychopath, which is always a good thing.
Well, I know. Thank you very much, and thank you for your show. Appreciate it, bye.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Oh, are you still there?
Oh yeah.
All
Always
right.
happy to talk about the Zodiac.
I know, me too. I'm into all that. I scare the heck out of Guinea constantly. I make him watch movies like The Bye-Bye Man, and he is so. I mean, he's a jumper. So when you go to the movie with the people when the pop out, he jumps out of his skin, and I love
Those
it.
are the best people to go with,
isn't it? And I was just thinking, you have to be probably the best person in the United States to bring to your Halloween party. So,
that's funny you say that, because when my friend used to give these Halloween parties, he would always say, "Well, tell a story." And I honestly, it never occurs to me that the stuff I'm writing is particularly spooky. I don't know why. It's just it's my everyday, so I don't think of it as particularly Halloweeny.
sure. Well, maybe the folks like us are just wired a little bit differently. So
I think that's true. Sometimes I will take a look at the people who follow my Facebook page, Historian of the Strange, and they're wonderful people. I mean, there are a lot of artists and jewelry makers and a lot of goths.
okay.
And I know that a lot of goths follow my stuff, which I love, because they see things a little differently than your average person does. But one of the things that I find that makes me so happy about the people who follow my page is, for example, there's this one lady who's a primary school teacher, but her hobby is raising tarantulas.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
tarantulas are actually very gentle creatures. So
Well, I just love the comparison.
yeah,
She spends all day with
Dichotomy.
horrible little monsters.
she nurtures little monsters all day long.
All little monsters.
So I do want to remind people, you can find his Facebook. Type in, let's see, the historian.
Historian of
Yes.
the Strange, yeah.
Historian of the Strange, and he does have some books. So in your book, the first one, is that the short stories or is that the second one?
All of my books are
short
short
stories.
pieces.
Good.
Yeah, one of these days I would like to write. There's a true crime book that I'm going to write when I'm done with my current book, and it'll be an opportunity to travel, and it's a very, very little known crime. And I think it deserves more attention than it's gotten. But, we can talk about that later.
Well, and that might be our next feature film.
Yes.
Yeah, it's possible, but this is probably a little too gruesome. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons why the story never got as much attention as it could have, because what happens in it was pretty gruesome. I might as well just mention it. There's no reason just to tease listeners.
Yes,
but
we need to hear it.
There was a man named Alonzo Robinson who was from Mississippi, and he was a necrophile, and he has been accused of being a serial killer called the Toledo Clubber, who is generally forgotten. But he was a man up in Toledo that attacked women with a lead pipe and assaulted them when they were unconscious. And the story, he was never caught, possibly never caught. There was a man arrested, but it's still kind of up in the air whether he did it or not. But Alonzo Robinson was in the area at the time, and some people think he did that. But one thing he definitely did was he moved out of a house, and the next people that moved in found some trunks that he left in the attic, and one of the trunks was stuffed with women's clothing, and the other was stuffed with 4 human heads and big clumps of hair.
And that was in Michigan.
That was in Chicago.
That was in Chicago.
That was in Royal Oak, Chicago, if I remember correctly. In fact, I'm looking at a picture of Alonzo Robinson right now.
I think
that would have been in the
1935.
Maybe, I don't remember offhand. Like I said, I've been collecting information about Alonzo Robinson for 20 years.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't really rushed to write the book because stories about black killers don't sell as well as stories about white killers, and stories about poor killers don't sell as well as stories about middle-class and rich killers.
Well, there's some empathy there, I guess. But when you're talking about somebody that curled flesh like beef jerky, I mean, I think you'll be okay.
Interesting.
I think you'll be all right.
Yeah. Well, he was such a strange character because in addition to they finally arrested him because he stole a middle-aged woman's body from a graveyard, and he spent I think a year or two in jail. When they arrested him, they assumed he was grave robbing to sell the body to a medical school or something.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he had very different plans for that body.
I'm pretty sure this guy wasn't donating parts for science.
Yeah, he was doing something strange.
He had some other thing in mind. Anyway, when he got out of jail, he eventually found his way back to Cleveland, Mississippi, which is where he was from, and he had other hobbies in addition to necrophilia. For example, he was a compulsive, obscene letter writer.
Yeah.
Which, if you've ever heard of Albert Fish, he had a lot of the same things.
Right.
He was polymorphous perverse, they call it. And so Alonzo Robinson did that, and it turned out that the United States Postal Service was doing an investigation of him. They had no idea what else he was doing, but he was sending these obscene letters to women that appeared in the society page. So as I was saying, he was back down in Cleveland, and a family called the Turners were murdered there. The father, Aurelius, and I think there was at least one son, and they were all beaten to death with a hammer, and the mother was probably beaten to death with a hammer too, but she was horribly mutilated.
Yeah.
And no one had any idea who did it. As you can imagine, this was quite a horrific event in a small town in Mississippi. Cleveland was actually fairly large by standards of the time and the place. Anyway, the police came to arrest Alonzo Robinson at the post office for sending obscene letters. Well, he had a gun with him, and there was a shootout at the post office. And when he was taken down to the police station, that's when they found out he had strips of human flesh in his pocket.
Yes.
Oh.
And he confessed to having taken parts of Mrs. Turner home with him. And that was when, they realized that he had committed this mass murder. And there was also a real danger of him being lynched. And the governor of Mississippi did not want that to happen, so he sent in the National Guard. And if you look, you can find photographs of machine gun emplacements that were placed around the courthouse in Cleveland. And Robinson was kept in a lynch-proof prison that was a few miles away. Anyway, because of this fear of lynching, they had to do the entire process of indicting, trying, sentencing, all in one day.
Well, back in those days, a mob would form, and they would be coming for, his head now this time. Hey,
definitely.
We have to take our first commercial break, Robert, so give us a minute. We're going to do a few commercials, and we will be right back.
We will return shortly, so pay attention and listen up.
Etheric Networks Internet has been providing internet for over 12 years to the Central Coast. We design our network to provide lower delay than the cable and the phone companies. We have a staff of over 30 trained professionals. We also use better quality power backup and networking equipment than most of our competitors. And if you mention KSCO, we'll give you $239 off of your installation. Since we last dropped into the studios of KSCO to record, we've added 3 new internet service technologies. Our G7 service, our 7th generation, our G8 service, and our fiber service, in addition to our flagship G6 long-range network. We have local technical support that's available 7/24. Importantly, Etheric offers the same speed on upload as download. We offer a symmetric service. Call 650-399-4200 or visit etheric.net online. That's ETHERIC.net. Don't forget to mention KSCO to receive your $239 discount on installation equipment. Happy surfing.
Look into the future with Coast to Coast AM.
Is the artificial intelligence revolution a war on the human race? I'm George Norrie, and join us on our next program with Jeremy Kahn as he says, maybe. And later on, investigative reporter Cheryl Jones joins us with stories of ghosts.
That's tonight on Coast to Coast AM.
Is the truth out there? Are there forces at work that we can't explain? Hi, I'm George Norrie, and I want to tell you about a new KSCO program that was inspired by the late, great Dave Allen, the Nighthawk, a long-running, popular, cutting-edge program from the early 90s right here on your favorite radio station, KSCO. The Nighthawk is resurrected every Tuesday and Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. on KSCO. Guinea and Kelly Powers season each program with actual recordings of the most popular Monterey Bay area radio personality of all time and his fascinating guests tackling the controversial, the unknown, and the downright mysterious. Don't miss the Nighthawk Resurrected on KSCO Santa Cruz, 1080 AM, 104.1 FM, the free KSCO app, and online at ksco.com.
This is Bill Lambert of Lambert & Son Moving and Storage, serving the moving and storage needs of Santa Cruz and the Central Coast since 2005. Call 831-777-6168. Rated 5 stars on Google and Yelp, and A+ on the Better Business Bureau. Our crews are experienced and highly trained to expertly handle all your moving needs. Packing, local moving, long-distance moving, short and long-term storage that is secure and worry-free. Fully licensed and insured. KSCO listeners get $50 of free boxes and packing materials with free no-obligation on-site estimate or move booked over the phone. KSCO listeners will also receive a gift certificate for the Dave Cave for KSCO merchandise and longevity products with every completed move. Call 831-777-6168.
Hey wine lovers! Armitage Wines is a family-owned winery producing the best estate-grown Pinot Noir and more in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Take a short drive to visit us in Scotts Valley, where we offer tastings on Saturdays and Sundays on the historic Heart of the Mountain estate. Sip a flight of our wines while taking in majestic views of vineyards, redwoods, and Monterey Bay. Reservations are required. Visit armitagewines.com. That's armitagewines.com.
This is the ZBS Radio Network. The
Nighthawk. Yeah, on KSCO Santa Cruz, we are your hosts, Ginny and Kelly Powers. Tuesday and Thursdays, 8 to 10 p.m. Yeah, Nighthawkers.
Welcome back to the Nighthawk.
This is the Nighthawk. We are talking to Robert Damon Schneck. And did I say that right? You know what? I just butcher everybody's name.
It really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Schneck.
Schneck.
I think I did it better that time.
Okay.
So Robert Damon Schneck, and he is a historian of the strange. You can find him on Facebook. Just type in historian of the strange. And The Bye-Bye Man is based on a short story by Robert, and included in his compilation, the Bye-Bye Man and the Other Strange But True Tales, which was originally published in 2005 under the title The President's Vampire. So welcome back. Thank you for giving us a break. We have to sometimes pay the bills over here.
I understand.
Robert, I have a few questions for you. I think that it would be cool if you explained to people Ed Gein.
Ed Gein, sure.
Because I think, and then I want to hear about the New Jersey Devil.
Well, we're kind of jumping from human to not so human.
Well, yeah, but I mean, where we're at on the Bye-Bye Man and Ed Gein. Gein.
See, Guinea's got the same thing that I have. We can't pronounce names either.
We're making butchery of
names around here on KSCO.
Well, I'm trying not to invoke the evil too much, so maybe.
Oh, maybe that works.
Yeah. Well, actually, you see, I don't think that they're as far apart as you say, because there is so much folklore around Ed Gein that he is practically as much a folk figure as the Jersey Devil is.
Right.
Especially in Wisconsin, of course, he is their state boogeyman. What would you like me to talk about, Ed Gein? I mean, I visited Plainfield, which is where he lived. A friend of mine lives in Wisconsin. Actually, the same friend who told me the story of the Bye-Bye Man. I went to Wisconsin with him once to visit his family, and I said, the only place I want to see is Plainfield, which is where Ed Gein was from. Actually, we passed the prison that was holding Jeffrey Dahmer on the way there.
Yeah.
But so we reached Plainfield, and I visited the hardware store where Ed Gein shot his final victim, Bernice Worden. And at the time, it was still a hardware store. I think it's closed now. Or it was it became a hardware chain for a while. And we went down, we found the country road where his house once stood. So I got to see it. I didn't trespass, but I did stand on the road to take a look at it. And then we went to the cemetery where he is buried, and his mother and his victims. Well, at least one of his victims, Bernice Worden, is buried there. And that was an absolutely fascinating day, because one of the things I don't like about doing the writing that I do is I often get stuck in my writing room. I never leave.
Yeah.
And this was a chance to actually go out, see the places, feel the places, feel how cold it was.
Sure.
I never realized, for example, that the cemetery where Ed Gein stole so many bodies was so close to the road. Things like that. Just I had no idea. When I visited the grave, the first body that he stole was of a middle-aged woman, and it was at the foot of his mother's grave. It's just a few feet away.
Maybe he was visiting Mom.
And
it
then
could
decided
be. In fact,
he needed something.
Yeah.
Well, some people like Werner Herzog thinks that Gein might have stolen his mother's body, but they never dug it up to check.
Can you tell just for the listeners who aren't familiar with who Ed Gein is, just a little synopsis? No, you're doing wonderful.
Because it's from Silent. I mean, everybody probably knows from Silence of the Lamb.
The movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Wild Bill, wasn't that?
It was based
No,
off.
it was Buffalo Bill.
Buffalo Bill.
Right, because he skins his humps.
Yes.
Yes.
So give us a little breakdown who Ed Gein is.
Okay. Ed Gein was a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
He was born, I think, in La Crosse must have been, let's see, he was
born August 27th, 1906.
Okay, thank you. So I think he was born in La Crosse, and his mother, according to all the sources, his mother was a religious fanatic.
Okay.
I am not sure that that's true, at least not the way that they lay it out, but apparently his mother, again, was supposedly a religious fanatic, and she thought that La Crosse was sinful, and she wanted a place that was more isolated away from cities. So eventually they settled in Plainfield, which is a small farming community.
In Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, yeah. Well, so La Crosse is too.
Right.
And I forget what county it's in, but it's a very isolated area. It still is. And so she raised her two sons, Henry the older one, and Ed. The father was kind of a non-entity, but he drank too much, and the mother supposedly dominated the house completely, supposedly. Anyway, Ed was very close to his mother, seemingly too close to his mother, and after his father died and Henry died under mysterious circumstances, Ed was left with Mom. And they were very close, maybe too close.
Yeah.
She had a stroke. He took care of her. Then she eventually died. I think it was around 46 or so. And she was buried. And Ed was fascinated by the books that he liked. He liked true crime books. He liked stories about the South Pacific, headhunting, cannibalism. He was fascinated by the oh my gosh, what's the name? The first really high-profile person to get a sex change in the United States, Christine Jorgensen. He was fascinated by the Christine Jorgensen story, and I think he was getting money to not grow things on his farm, so he had a little bit of an income.
Yeah.
And he also worked for other people. He worked as a farmhand. He babysat. And no one thought really much of him one way or the other. They thought he was a little simple. They didn't think he bathed enough. But he seemed pleasant enough, and he was a good worker.
Sure.
So, and people made fun of him because he was a bachelor and he was peculiar.
Yeah.
But everyone seemed to like him. Anyway, he lived out on his farm, which decayed and decayed, and he filled it up with his magazines and his newspapers. And then there was a disappearance. A woman who ran a roadhouse, whose name just escaped me, she disappeared, and they found some blood. And that was very strange. And then 2 years later, a woman named Bernice Warden disappeared. Now, Bernice Warden was the lady who owned the hardware store in downtown Plainfield, and Ed had gone down there claiming that he wanted to buy some antifreeze, which he did, and then he asked to try out some of the long guns that they had there. And when he did, he took a bullet out of his pocket and shot Bernice Worden in the back of her head.
Wow.
He then took her back to the farm, hung her up. He stripped down the body, hung up the body by its heels the way a person does when they're field dressing a deer.
Yeah.
And he hollowed out the body and took off the head. And then he went out to dinner with one of the people who had invited him to dinner. Well, when Bernice Worden's son came back, he found the trail of blood. He found a receipt saying that Ed Gein had purchased some antifreeze. So they went out to his farm. They found Mrs. Worden's body hanging there, which must have been something that the people who found her dreamt about for the rest of their lives.
Of course.
They arrested Ed. He came along, and they gave him a pretty serious interrogation. He eventually admitted everything, and he was not tried initially because they thought he was just too crazy to be tried. He instead went to the mental hospital and stayed there for a few years. Eventually, they thought he was well enough to try him, but so they tried him again, and he was found not guilty by reason of insanity and spent the rest of his life in mental hospitals in Wisconsin. The thing about Ed Gein, though, was the fallout from his story, because it was really interesting to Robert Bloch, who based Psycho on Ed Gein. And he was inspired by it. And if you ever read the original Psycho, I'm not talking about
not
Hitchcock
the movie.
here.
Yeah.
Not the movie. No, if you ever read Bloch's Psycho, you'll see that Norman Bates was a plump, middle-aged man who used to sit around and read about bizarre Aztec rituals and things like that. And it's a different story, but you can see that there is a connection. In fact, he even mentions the Gein case at one point in the book.
Yeah.
So that really brought the story into the mainstream, as well as it appearing in a number of true crime magazines at the time.
The stuff that they found in his home is
I'm sorry,
is what is completely
That's the bizarre part.
That is why
I heard your interview. That's why I wanted you to tell everybody about what they had on the walls. Because I don't think people
realize,
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We're here doing this all together. You're doing wonderful.
It's that, again, this stuff is what I do all day, so I forget.
Yeah, I know.
After they found Worden's body, they began to look into the house. Now, the house was in poor shape. Ed had been saving garbage for years. He had a coffee can full of chewed gum. He had a zither. He had old Christmas wreaths, garbage, junk, piles of rotting magazines, piles of cans of beans that he ate.
He was an original hoarder before Hoarders was a TV show.
Oh, yeah. He was a hoarder.
Hoarders to beginner.
But the things that he hoarded were a little different, though.
Yes, they were.
Because in addition to garbage, he had handicrafts. He had things that he made from bodies that he stole from the cemetery and from the bodies of his victims. So one of the first things they found was Bernice Worden's heart in a pan on the stove. That doesn't mean he was cooking it, but that's where they found it. They found her head inside a bag, and he had put 2 bent nails in the ears and ran a string around it. He apparently was planning to hang the head from the ceiling or from a wall as a decoration.
Yeah, like Christmas.
They found they found human skulls on his bedposts.
Yeah.
They found human skin masks hanging on the walls. They found the face of the woman who had disappeared a few years earlier, the
Mary
woman
Hogan.
who ran the roadhouse. Mary Hogan. I couldn't think of it. They found her face, as was one of his masks. They found a box of female genitals, one of which had been painted gold and had a ribbon on it. They found, bowls made out of craniums. There were chairs that had been upholstered. His dining room chairs had been upholstered in human flesh. In fact, I believe that the only item, one of the few items, rather, that was photographed from the house are the chairs that were upholstered in human skin. You can see one being carried out during the police were doing their search. That and Mrs. Warden's head, and maybe one or two other things. There are a lot of photographs floating around online of what claims to be the bowls and Mary Hogan's mask and all that, but those aren't real. Those were made by artists.
Oh, so
all of the actual items were cremated.
Do you know what they did with all of it?
Yeah, they cremated it.
Oh, okay,
cremated everything.
Yeah, that's what they say anyway. I wouldn't be surprised if someone's got one in their attic or something that they stole. Things like that do happen.
They have the human nipple doorbell hidden in their attic?
No, he didn't have a doorbell. He had a belt made out of nipples.
Oh.
And he had, he had a bowl full of noses, and of course the pull string on his window shades were lips. So there were a lot of things in the house which were, and you can imagine, that has inspired a lot of filmmakers.
Yeah.
First, the most famous, of course, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
yes,
where a lot of these items, or at least a lot of these items, are can be seen as the inspiration for the interior of the house. The skull bowls, in fact, the bones, the artwork made out of bones, the mobiles, and all those things.
Right.
And just the filthiness of the interior. All that goes right back to Ed Gein. And then there were other films inspired by it, like Deranged, and which made him out to be a sadist, and that never happened. He just wanted the bodies. He didn't want to hurt anybody, really. He didn't want to torment anybody. He just wanted their bodies.
Because a lot of them came from him getting bodies that were already deceased, correct?
Yes, most of them were.
Right.
Most of them were. They think he stole at least 10 bodies. Some of them he returned. At least he returned the parts that he didn't keep.
How nice of him.
But occasionally, for example, when they dug up one of the bodies, they found that the coffin was empty, and all they found was a crowbar inside the coffin, which proved that he had been there.
Right.
Because initially they didn't believe him, because they had no idea bodies were being stolen.
Yeah. Well, how would you know?
Which is, of course, and it's easy to understand because, and it's not like he would dig up bodies that had been long buried. He dug up freshly buried bodies, and so the dirt was already turned over.
Yeah, so it wasn't anything out of the ordinary.
It was like easy digging.
No one had any idea that this was going on. Supposedly, he claimed to have had an accomplice in the beginning who died, but that's never been proven. I think he said it was an old man named Gus, but like I said, that's never been proven. I don't know if this is true or not, but I have been writing about another grave robber called the Whitmire Ghoul, who was never caught, and he was active in Florida. And the funny thing about the Whitmire Ghoul is, while he was busy digging up bodies I think it was outside Pensacola, I think. Is that in the Panhandle, Pensacola? Because it was, I think it's in the Panhandle. Okay, it was Pensacola. But while the Whitmire Ghoul was digging up bodies in Pensacola, that's when the Ed Gein story broke.
Interesting.
Right in the middle. Yeah, right in the middle of the Whitmire Ghoul's activities, and they never caught the Whitmire Ghoul. So I sometimes wonder if the Whitmire Ghoul was sitting down there in Pensacola reading the Gein story, which was covered in Life magazine.
Yeah, and he was going, take a seat back to me, Edward Gein.
Yeah.
Right. I'm doing my work here.
Well, he didn't take the bodies home, though.
Yeah.
He just molested them and carried off one of them, but they found the body. The Whitmire Ghoul was, you see, like I was saying about how this stuff tends to bleed into folklore.
Yeah.
Now, Ed Gein was responsible for a whole area of folk humor called Geiners, which were jokes based on Ed Gein. And this was the whole era of sick jokes, baby jokes, things, dead baby jokes, those things. So Geiners were jokes like, what's Ed Gein's favorite cookie? Lady's fingers. Is Ed Gein going to the party only if he can dig up a date? Those sorts of things. I didn't say they were great. I just, yeah, those are called Geiners. So, folk humor was, so folklore did grow out of Ed Gein, and besides, his effect on popular culture. Because of, in addition to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Deranged, there
Silence
was
of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs, where Buffalo Bill is making a girl suit out of real girls, is what I think is what they say in the movie.
Right.
And I don't remember what they say in the book, but. And in that respect, that comes out of Gein, because one of the things Gein did with the bodies was he would skin them and turn them into very crude clothing. So he had a vest with human breasts on it. He would cover his genitals with female genitals. He had leggings made out of human skin. And, of course, he had his masks and his hair, which he took from the bodies. And supposedly, what he would do is he would put this outfit on, and he had a drum that he made out of a coffee can and stretched human skin across the top. And he would play the drum and scream, and he would dance around outside his farmhouse in the moonlight wearing this outfit, banging on the drum and screaming.
Do you think...
At least, or howling at the moon. At least that's what he said.
Do you think people like him are...
Possessed
are they
by
possessed?
demons?
Like, what do you think? I mean, or are they just that sick in the head?
I think Ed Gein was I think he was profoundly lonely.
Yeah.
I think he was profoundly removed from the rest of society. I think he felt so alienated from the rest of the world that he could barely even relate to them. He could talk and he could have a pleasant conversation and he could be reasonably good company. But how do you relate to people when your idea of a good time is dressing up in human skin? It's a little bit like the problem Jeffrey Dahmer has. People talk about how do you explain to somebody when you're a 12-year-old that you're excited by human viscera?
Yeah, you don't. Well,
where do you go with that?
I don't think you do.
You're going to have to hold that thought because we're at the top of the hour.
We are at the 9 o'clock break.
We at the 9 o'clock break. We're going to have to get back to some of these topics. Do you think that Ed Gein was having sex with his mother?
No.
You can't ask that 20 seconds before the break.
Whoa.
Hang on.
I'm just
hang on there. We got 15 seconds. If you want to call in, our number is 831-479-1080. Call in. We're happy to talk to you, and I hope we're not freaking you out, but I hope we are.
With which you disagree, please let us know by writing to us at comments@ksco.com.
Is the ZBS Radio Network.
The Nighthawk. Yeah. Santa Cruz. We are your hosts, Ginny and Kelly Powers. Tuesday and Thursdays, 8 to 10 p.m. Yeah, Night Hawkers.
Welcome back to the second hour of the Night Hawk. I'm Guinea, and I'm here with my amazing host, Kelly Powers.
Welcome back. This is KSCO, the Night Hawk Resurrected.
And we also have...
We have our guest, and this is a Dave Allen original guest back from 1999, Robert Damon Schneck, and he is the historian of the strange. You can find him on Facebook. Just type in Historian of the Strange, and you'll be able to see all the stuff that he has to offer. He has published some books, The President's Vampire. And are you there, Robert?
I am here.
He is back. So yeah, there's some definite strange stuff with Ed Gein. I mean, he pretty much took the cake on being a weirdo.
Yeah,
he did. Yes.
Hollywood obviously took kind to Ed Gein and made a lot of creepy stories.
Yeah, you watch these movies and hope to God that they're just created by some writer with a sick brain or imagination. And so, there is a lot of truth in some of the stuff you see on movies.
Well, a lot of the stuff that happens in real life can't appear in movies because it's too horrible.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree.
So why don't you tell us about some more?
Do you want to hear Ed Gein joke?
Sure.
Ed Gein was popular with the ladies. There were always women hanging around his place. Ew.
Another Geiner.
Yeah,
easy, Kelly.
This came right from the Geiners, and there's a whole bunch of them. Why did they let Ed Gein out on New Year's Day? So he can dig up a fresh date.
Okay.
So, anyways.
Easy.
Well, but there's never been an actual movie made just on Ed Gein, is there? I mean, I'm sure there's documentaries.
Yeah, there was one. The guy who starred in he was in a movie about Charles Manson around 1976. He appeared in a movie that was the closest I think they've come to an accurate movie about Ed Gein.
I've seen if I could find it.
Can't think of his name offhand.
Is it called In the Light of the Moon?
Might be. I don't remember. I remember seeing the movie, but it was a long time ago.
Well, and with you're so, in all of this, and I'm sure you see a lot of it, and there's so much Hollywood that is added into these that.
Yeah, there is, and I do understand why they do it. They've got to make it. They've got to make it appeal to more or less ordinary people.
Yeah.
But and the fact is that a lot of the horror of somebody like Ed Gein is the normalness of him.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a pleasant little man. That's what everyone thought he was. He was just a little odd man that people would make fun of. In fact, if you go to, I don't think it's in Plainfield, but the cell where Ed Gein was kept is open to the public, and they have a life-size cutout of him inside the cell. And everyone's first response is, my goodness, he was so small.
He's a little man.
He was a little man, right? And, of course, his car was bought by a showman who showed it around Wisconsin for a few years, Ed Gein's death car. That was popular, even though he did not use that to haul bodies. He probably used his pickup.
That was just his car that he went and got groceries with. Or not groceries.
Yeah, that was...
I mean, whatever he got.
Whatever he needed, yes.
Yes. So what else? Let's talk about a little bit of maybe some lore. What's your favorite American story that has, fascinated you the most?
That's a very difficult question. I would be hard-pressed to pick one that fascinates me the most. By the way, did you still want me to talk about the Jersey Devil?
Yeah, let's go with the Jersey Devil.
Oh, all right, sure. The basic story is very simple. There was a woman named Mrs. Leeds who lived down in southern New Jersey during the 18th century, early 18th century, and the story goes that that she was a witch, and that she had 12 children, and she said, if I have another child, I hope it's the devil, because she couldn't stand having any more children. So on the night that she gave birth, the story goes, there was a terrible storm outside. The baby was born. It looked like a normal little boy, but then it transformed. Its feet turned into cloven hooves. It sprouted wings. Its head turned into a horse's head, and it killed everyone that was in the room and flew up the chimney screaming and was never seen again among people. After that, it lived in the Pine Barrens, which is an enormous section of southern Jersey with which is sort of a scrub pine. There used to be a lot of iron manufacturers down there and iron foundries, but those are almost all grown over. But that area is very strange. I mean, supposedly there are areas of the Pine Barrens that are still unexplored. Anyway, the Jersey Devil would show up every few years, and it would scream. It would sit on chimneys and scream. It would carry off livestock. There were these panics where supposedly the Jersey Devil was being sighted in Jersey and across the river in Pennsylvania too. So there were these outbreaks. And over time, Jersey Devil sightings have changed. It's become less like a dragon and more like there have been sightings of these sort of monstrous bear-type creatures, and some people have seen what looked like Bigfoot, and they've called that the Jersey Devil. But now it's mainly a hockey team.
It is a hockey team. Jersey,
yes.
they definitely capitalized on the Jersey Devil.
Oh yeah, well we've got it. We've got Tony Soprano and the Jersey Devil.
You're right. Because that's where you're at. You're in Jersey, and
that's right.
In
fact, I drove past Holstein's where the show ended just yesterday.
Okay, yeah. Well, there's so much history in Jersey that, and back in 1900, I think people were very much on the superstitious side, so I could see where stuff like this would take off.
Well, yes, but if it's just a question of people seeing monsters, you don't have to go back that far in time.
Yeah.
You go back to the 1970s, for example, and there were all these outbreaks of monster sightings, usually Bigfoot-type monsters, swamp ape, skunk ape-type monsters all over the United States, small towns. In fact, a filmmaker named Seth Breedlove has done a series of films he has a company called Small Town Monsters, where he's made documentaries about these small town outbreaks, the Minerva monster, the monster of White House, I think it is, a bunch of them. And he's really bringing attention to some of my favorite stories. And people were seeing monsters. They were seeing strange things in the sky. Mothman was accompanied by a whole bunch of peculiar phenomena.
What is Mothman?
Oh, okay. Mothman was seen in a place called Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
Don't press me for dates because I don't have them.
You're okay.
But it began with a bunch of young people who were driving around at night, and they went into this area called the Dynamite area, I think it's called. Anyway, it's an area where they had these big, like, cement igloos that were used to store dynamite. I assume during World War II or maybe there was an army base nearby. I don't remember why the dynamite area was there, but they were driving along and they saw this gigantic creature in their headlights in the road, and it stood something like 6 feet tall. It had a human body, a human-ish body, these very large wings and red eyes. In some versions, it doesn't have a head. Instead, it's got the red eyes are about where the chest would be.
Yeah.
On the chest somewhere. And it held out its wings and without flapping them, flew up into the sky. Now, there were a bunch of similar sightings in the area at the time. John Keel, of course, is famous for chronicling them, as along with some of the other oddities that were going on at the time, including Men in Black and giant bird sightings. There were some poltergeist outbreaks. There were some UFO sightings. And, of course, then the Silver Bridge collapsed, and the Silver Bridge joined Point Pleasant to, what's the name of the city, the town on the other side? I don't remember. But it was this big bridge over the river, and it collapsed on Thanksgiving Day, I believe.
And they saw the Mothman above it before it collapsed, correct?
That's the story. I don't
it's
think
the
that's
Silver
true.
Bridge on
The
1965.
Silver Bridge.
And
It
there
was
was
65, okay.
there was a death of 46 people, and the legend is that it was connected to the Mothman sightings.
Yes.
Right. Now, that's the legend. And there is one thing I would, if you want to stretch a point, I mean, if you look at the meaning of the word monster, it comes from a Latin word that actually means omen, because traditionally monsters were omens that something bad was going to happen, the appearance of monsters. So, again, if you'd like, you could say that the Mothman was an omen that something bad was going to happen. Now, there have been other winged human sightings. There was a big outbreak in Chicago a while back, and a friend of mine, Linda Godfrey, recorded a bunch of them. It was they are actually a really interesting area because they've been sighted in England. They have Owlman and
because they're similar, but just a little bit,
tweaked,
a little bit different.
Local variations. In a way, they're kind of like urban legends, that there are local versions of a lot of these things.
Right. So what about, and I saw this in some of your writings, what about the evil clowns driving in vans? Because I'll tell you.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
My favorite, I guess it would be considered horror. The It is by far my favorite. I'm actually wearing a pair of It Vans right now. So I would love to hear about your evil clowns driving vans.
Well, evil clowns predate. They predate both It and they predate John Wayne Gacy. Now, John Wayne Gacy is the Chicago serial killer who had about 28 bodies of young men that he murdered in his basement, and he was a member of the JCs, and there was a group connected to the JCs that they were involved in charitable work, and one of the things he did for charity was he would dress up as a clown. He would be a clown at parades and parties and visited children in hospitals and things like that. So a lot of people have connected the clown stories to both Gacy, which I think was 1975 or 1976, and It, which it did very well as a book. But when the TV version came out around 1980, that's when clowns really burst into public consciousness.
Sure.
Now, I do not remember the dates, so so bear with me.
You're doing good.
But the clown outbreak started, if I remember correctly, in Massachusetts. The first big outbreak started in Massachusetts, and it involved girls seeing this frightening man dressed who looked like a clown. And there were a series of similar sightings. As you went west, there would be more and more of these sightings kept breaking out. And these clowns were supposedly being seen in vans, trying to tempt children into getting into the vans. Clowns were seen carrying weapons, threatening children. There were stories of people wearing other kinds of costumes, superhero outfits, giant bunny costumes, gorilla costumes, all trying to get children to come with them, and again appearing in these vans. Now, it sounds like straight out folklore, but because, and of course, almost all of the witnesses were children, but not all of them. For example, one of the children who had just left her house and was walking to school, I think with her sister or a friend, saw a clown in a van pulled up, tried to get her to come into the van. She ran off. The clown drove away, but the mother did not see the clown, but she did see the van. So something was going on, at least in that one case. Now, the clown panic died out, but it turns out that just died out for a while, because of course we had big clown outbreaks a few years ago, and we had a phenomena that in folklore is called ostension, which is where somebody takes something from folklore and makes it real. Yeah. So people were starting to dress up as clowns and scaring the hell out of people.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of YouTube videos of clowns chasing people, and so I can imagine that would happen.
And of course, then there were movies like Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yes,
which was filmed in Santa Cruz.
It was.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Well, Santa Cruz has its own history, its own gruesome history, but that's for, I don't need to tell you about that.
We'll have
to talk about that maybe at Halloween.
Yeah.
yeah. But I personally, I think that that there's a connection between the original clown outbreak and the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, and also between the clowns and the Atlanta child killings, which took place in, I think, 74, 75. If for people who don't know, the Atlanta child murders went on for, I think, 2 years. These children kept disappearing. They were being asphyxiated when the bodies turned up.
It was July 1979 to May of 1981, over a 2-year period.
Oh, gosh. Oh, I really messed up then.
No, you didn't. We're getting this together. There was at least 28 children, adolescents, and adults were killed.
Yeah, it's the list has always been questioned because there are why some are included, why some are excluded has never made a lot of sense to people. But anyway, there were these terrible deaths, and it went on for a long time. The classic death of one of these was an adolescent boy who was found asphyxiated, and and eventually they arrested a young man named Wayne Williams, who was arrested for the last, I think, 2 murders, which were incidentally of adults. And he was caught because he was heard dropping a body off a bridge into the water, and they had staked out the bridges because the killer knew that they were checking for fiber evidence. So by dropping the bodies into the water, that would wash away the fibers. Anyway, while the Atlanta child murders were going on, there was a lot of folklore going on in Atlanta, and there were these stories that these children were being abducted in vans, and that the vans might have been driven by Klansmen, and that the Klansmen were killing black children in order to, first of all, to show Atlanta, which had just elected its first black mayor, and its first black police chief, to show them that they were not in charge and that they were trying to start a race war. That's what some people believe.
And so they were trying to get Wayne Williams to take the fall for all of these bodies of these young kids. Am I right?
Well,
or am I wrong?
that's what some people believe. The evidence that the Klan had any connection to these murders is very thin. The FBI did have some recordings of some questionable statements because they had been bugging these people, the phone members. They'd been bugging Klansmen's phone calls. And if anyone's curious, you can just go online. All of the FBI papers are online. But again, a lot of the public believed that these children were being abducted not just by the Ku Klux Klan. There were also stories that they were being abducted by doctors. And remember, the CDC is in Atlanta, and at the time there was a lot of interest in something called interferon, which was supposed to be the miracle cancer cure. And some people made a connection that maybe these children were being abducted and their blood was being used to make interferon at the CDC. Now, that might sound like it's completely out of the air.
That doesn't surprise me.
Well, this was one of the stories that were being discussed at the time. And while this might sound like it comes out of nowhere, there is a tradition in American black folklore of people called night doctors. And the night doctors were, you'll find this throughout 19th century, early 20th century black folklore. The night doctors were doctors or medical students. They're also called Ku Klux doctors, who would leave the medical schools at night and abduct black people they found, throw them into these silenced carriages, and cart them off to the schools to either be dissected or turned into medicine. In fact, what was the name of that oil that people used to take all the time? Castor oil. There was a belief that castor oil was made out of black blood. So a lot of black people did not take castor oil because of this folk belief. So it's not difficult to see how something like the night doctors could have turned into something like the clowns. And as ridiculous as this might sound, this is not crazy for folklore. Klan and clown are very similar.
Absolutely.
And they both involve men wearing bizarre costumes with white faces and carrying weapons.
I mean, I can see the connection very easily.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that the Klan in the 1970s was trying to get young members. And what did they do to attract new members? They sent out something called the Klan Van, which had promotional material.
Okay.
Yeah, it was so again.
So you can tie it all back into the killer clowns in a van.
I think that's where it comes from originally. I think that is the spark plug that got the whole thing started.
I like it.
The guy, the expert on it is called Joe Derwin, and he has really done some amazing work on that. And if he hadn't just given me his research, which I will never be able to thank him for enough, if he had not just given me his research, I would never have been able to write what I did.
Well, we are going to go to our last break. Just want to remind everybody this is the Nighthawk Resurrected, and we are talking to Robert Damon Schneck, and he is the historian of the strange. So give us a minute. We'll be right back. This is the Nighthawk Resurrected on KSCO Santa Cruz.
What do you think? We will return shortly. So pay attention and listen up.
Almost anything on the internet except personal service. Hello, I'm Scott Bedell with Bedell Nelson Harbert Insurance, your Allied agent in Santa Cruz. When you call Bedell Nelson Harbert, a real person will answer the phone. A real person will help you save money by packaging your home and auto insurance with Allied. We can even help you save on your vacation rental with the Foremost Insurance Group. Give us a call at 426-3700 and ask a real person for a free, no-obligation quote. We are the real people of Bedell Nelson Harbert Insurance, and we can save you money because Allied and Nationwide are on your side.
Look into the future with Coast to Coast AM.
Is the artificial intelligence revolution a war on the human race? I'm George Norrie, and join us on our next program with Jeremy Kahn as he says maybe. And later on, investigative reporter Cheryl Jones joins us with stories of ghosts.
That's tonight on Coast to Coast AM.
Is the truth out there? Are there forces at work that we can't explain? Hi, I'm George Norrie, and I want to tell you about a new KSCO program that was inspired by the late, great Dave Allen, the Nighthawk, a long-running, popular, cutting-edge program from the early 90s right here on your favorite radio station, KSCO. The Nighthawk is resurrected every Tuesday and Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. on KSCO. Guinea and Kelly Powers season each program with actual recordings of the most popular Monterey Bay area radio personality of all time and his fascinating guests tackling the controversial, the unknown, and the downright mysterious. Don't miss the Nighthawk Resurrected on KSCO Santa Cruz, 1080 AM, 104.1 FM, the free KSCO app, and online at ksco.com.
As a combat wounded veteran, I know how hard it is to come home and build a meaningful life. I'm Latoya Lucas, and I'm a veteran. When I was in Iraq, our vehicle was hit. A rocket-propelled grenade exploded right under my seat. Traumatic brain injury, a fractured pelvis, severe burns. They didn't think I was going to make it. I had to learn to live with the scars, both visible and invisible.
DAV helps veterans like Latoya get the benefits they've earned. They help more than 1 million veterans every year in life-changing ways.
With DAV on my side, I was able to pursue my dreams. If my story can touch a heart, it can change a life. My victory is overcoming my wounds so I can help other veterans.
Latoya Lucas, may your victories inspire many more. Support more victories for veterans. Go to DAV.org.
You gotta maintain to retain big quality roofing. You gotta maintain to retain big quality roofing.
My name is William Au. I'm with Au Family Properties. We have a lot of roofs. And when we have problems, the first person I call is Buck Tinari at Bay Quality Roofing. He will go out of his way to make sure that your problem is fixed. This week I had a problem. I had a leak. I was in the middle of nowhere in the desert. He had a crew there that very next morning, fixed it. I could report back to my tenant, your leak is fixed on a Sunday. That's a miracle. That is Buck Tinari at Bay Quality Roofing.
You gotta maintain to retain big quality roofing. You gotta maintain to retain big quality roofing.com.
Recently on Flight 1080.
Now I see here, Dave, that there's a wall of Pop-Tarts. Beautiful construction. I'm going to take these roller skates and I'm going to strap on some of these rockets to the bottom of my roller skate.
Before you go, let me just do this since we're being recorded. Let me hear you say, I love Tangy Tangerine, and my last dying wish would be for you guys to buy it.
I love Tangy Tangerine, and I would love you for you to buy it, please.
I'm Billy Army. Okay, Billy, here we go. Oh. Oh, Billy.
I went through those Pop-Tarts like a hot knife through butter.
MZ's going to be mad when he sees that you blasted through the wall, dude.
MZ
We just got
will
the place remodeled.
MZ's never going to know about this.
Live 1080, Monday through Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. right here on AM 1080 KSCO.
This is ZBS Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. You got it. You have got it.
I think I got it.
You're listening to Dave Allen, the Nighthawk.
And Guinea.
And Kelly Powers, too. Welcome back to the Nighthawk. This is KSCO Santa Cruz, and we are talking to Robert Damon Schneck, and we have Guinea here. Hi, Guinea.
Hi, Kelly.
Are you scared?
I'm getting there.
He's scared. I can see it. He's not going to sleep tonight. You see what you've done, Robert? You've scared the heck out of him.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I guess it's just when you're constantly doing something. It's like my mom was a nurse in an emergency room, and things that upset her, things that upset normal people did not faze her.
Well, you know, that's funny you mentioned that, because I got an email on a question from a listener that said, how did this guy get started researching and writing this scary stuff?
Oh, well, I don't. It's just the way I'm wired.
It just came naturally.
Well, that, and when I was little, my mom would come home from work in the morning, and I'd be sitting there eating my waffle, and Mom would be telling me about the body that was brought in last night in 3 different bags, and she had to pull out an arm, and it had a wristwatch on it that was still ticking.
Well, no wonder.
Yeah, so...
No wonder. Is your mom still with us?
No, Mom died last year.
Oh, I'm
sorry. And it's she always made this stuff funny. I mean, I know that it's what they call fireman humor.
Sure.
But it always cracked me up. I have never, me and the people that follow Historian of the Strange, we do enjoy things that make nice, normal people wonder what's wrong with us.
Well, I am one of your new followers and fans, and so thank you.
Oh, I'm glad.
I appreciate the strange and the unusual. So, anything new that you've been working on, or that you're putting on your Facebook?
Oh, well, the Facebook, I will put on anything interesting that I find while I'm doing research. I will post it on Facebook. But you see, I began doing the Historian of the Strange page because everyone kept telling me, if you're a writer, you need a platform. So, and a platform is something like a Facebook page or a blog or a YouTube station. Well, I figured that I'm always going through old newspapers anyway, and I save these stories because I think they might be able to become a story someday. And it occurred to me, well, why not just put these two together and make it into a Facebook page? And that's what I did. And it's been going for, I think, 8 or 9 years now. I post almost every day, so there are thousands of items that have been posted. You're
archiving these articles that they'll be gone, right? So
I find them on old newspaper databases.
Got it.
And I put them on my site so people can enjoy them, but also so I can find them.
Yeah.
It's like having my own filing system. It's terrific. But you see, now during the lockdown, it occurred to me, I have these thousands of articles. I love these stories, but most of them aren't involved enough to justify an entire chapter in a book, but they're still interesting.
Yeah.
So I said, well, why not just start to collect them into a book that I can just have a collection of bizarre Americana and bizarre, morbid, grotesque Americana with a little bit of paranormal thrown in, maybe if I choose to. But and that's what I'm doing. I'm putting together a book of these. It's going to be an encyclopedia of very strange Americana. So, for example, right now I just finished collecting stories about men who, in the late 19th, early 20th century, there were these men that usually the newspapers dubbed Jack the Blank. So there was Jack the Paint Thrower.
Yeah, I just saw that one.
Jack the Ink Slinger, Jack the Vitriol Thrower. And these men had some kind of strange fetish for destroying women's clothing. They would sneak up on them, and they would throw acid on their clothing, or they would throw ink. And it occurred to me that, first of all, this doesn't seem to be something that happens much anymore. I'm sure occasionally it does, but it was obviously enough of a thing in the late 19th, early 20th centuries for it to make the newspapers fairly often.
And they wrote about it all the time.
And they wrote about it. So it occurred to me, well, I'm going to find out the names of these people, who they were, and what dates they were. And while I'm not a psychologist, I don't pretend to be able to know how to explain their actions. No one's even written them down. So how are we going to learn anything about them if no one's even recorded them?
Yeah.
So, I, for example, I've discovered the names of some of these men when they were caught, what their family situations were. They all seem to be, with one exception, they all seem to be family men.
Interesting.
They were married, they had jobs, but they also had this very peculiar fetish. So, and again, a fetish that seems to have disappeared. Now, some of these fetishes still, they still happen. For example, we had something a few years ago where somebody was sticking people on the New York City subway with needles.
I remember that.
Yeah, so things like that used to happen too. That still happens. In fact, there's a name for that.
Was that during the 80s when HIV?
Yeah.
That was like a really, people were terrified. They were scared to drink out of cups and stuff. And yeah, I remember that.
That's when we used to go into restrooms, kicking the doors open and turning on the faucets with our feet.
I know.
That was. But there is also a fetish that's called piquerism, that some people are involved. It's a form of sadism. I assume that these men who destroyed women's clothing were getting some kind of sadistic thrill out of it.
Sure.
I think it had some sexual basis. I don't know what, but. I can see where it would, and some of them had actually developed like they were using syringes to shoot acid onto women's clothing and things like that. It was very bizarre, but it's also interesting because Jack the Ripper happened just in 1888, and very soon after that, Jack the Blank became standard. So there was, in addition to these kinds of
so do you think that's where the name kind of came from? I mean, maybe not consciously, but maybe subconsciously, because people had heard so much about Jack the Ripper.
Oh no, I think it was conscious. I think people said, "Wow, this is." You got to remember that even though Jack the Ripper was not a unique criminal, the attention he got and the name he got and the fact that it was reported in these newspapers all over the world, that had never happened before.
Right.
So, and, a lot of people in America thought Jack the Ripper had come to America after he finished England. There were a few murders in the United States, probably by copycats. There was a very famous one of this an old prostitute named, her nickname was Old Shakespeare, and she was murdered in a sort of a Jack the Ripper-y kind of way. So that got the story started that Jack the Ripper had come to the United States, but the term Jack the became a standard for these people that, you know, these men that attack women. There was also Jack the Hugger, Jack the Kisser, Jack the Starer. There was, and if you want to go back even further into British history, there's Spring-Heeled Jack.
And what is that?
Oh, Spring-Heeled Jack was a human figure that, according to one description, wore a silver helmet and had a light on his chest and an evil, fiendish face, and he had springs in his heels. That is to say,
so that's why he was.
That he would take these tremendous jumps, and he had a cape and all that, and he would terrify people.
Yeah.
And there were outbreaks of Spring-Heeled Jack type figures in Britain and in the United States. There was one in O'Donnell Heights in Baltimore. There was one in, I don't remember whether it was Provincetown. There was one called the Blue Flash in Provincetown. So, you know, these stories are very peculiar, but they pop up all over the place. There was even one I remember from Borneo where it was believed that this evil figure with these spring heels would jump around in the jungle and try to capture people to drain their blood, because it was believed that human blood was needed as sacrifice, because the government was doing these big plans like putting up these bridges, and you can't just put up a bridge. You have to have a sacrifice to accompany it. So it was believed that these blood gatherers were gathering blood for the government in order to put up these big bridges.
Well, these, you know, human sacrifice and blood rituals go way, 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 way back.
Yeah, but and they are, the thinking still exists. For example, in when the Challenger exploded down in South America, it was argued that the Challenger exploded because they had not used human fat, which is needed to keep making these sorts of things work. And they have this. They have a belief down in South America of something called the Pishtaco, which is somebody who gathers human fat.
Did you say the fish taco?
No, the pish taco with a P.
The pish taco.
Pish taco.
The pish taco, yeah.
Okay.
And strangely enough, I am almost exactly what a pish taco is supposed to look like. I'm a plump white man. I'm a plump white man with white skin, fair hair, and fair eyes. And they believe that pish tacos would kill the local people, boil them down, take their fat, and use it for all sorts of things. They would use it for medicine. They would use it to make church bells. It was that they hadn't used it in the Challenger that caused it to explode.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there have been some outbreaks. There have been some pish taco panics where foreign tourists have been murdered
because they're needing their human fat.
Yeah, and it's also related to beliefs in children being abducted and organs being stolen, things like that.
Watch out, Kelly's gonna pish taco me.
I'm not gonna fish taco you, Guinea. I mean, that actually gets a little bit into this kind of goes a little on the other side, but it gets a little bit into that kind of QAnon theory.
Yeah. With
the children being abducted and the adrenochrome and all that crazy stuff.
Oh, it definitely is related to it. In fact, I before I started writing the book that I'm writing, I was thinking about writing a book on nothing but stories from around the world about people that are being abducted for their organs, their blood, their fat, their adrenochrome, they just all of the different stories. I was thinking about doing a sort of an encyclopedia approach to it, just so it would all be in one place.
Or maybe a
Archived.
chapter in your new book. You could have another section.
Maybe it could be like Wikipedia, but for scary.
Scary-pedia.
Spookypedia.
There we go. I like that better.
But
we need to get on that one. That's a great idea.
But some of these stories are really fascinating. For example, in Malawi in Africa has a real problem with vampire belief.
Yeah.
The connection is very strange, though, because it's not necessarily the way you think it's going to be. For example, it is believed in Malawi that firemen abduct people for their blood, and they use the blood to paint the fire engines red.
I just saw
and
that.
to keep them red. Isn't that? I find
gruesome and
so
bizarre.
Fascinating.
I mean, how did they even get there?
I don't know. But part of it is probably related to some of the stuff involving missionaries, because it was believed, for example, that there was a belief among Africans that the only way white people could survive in Africa, where there were, between the heat and the tropical diseases and all that, was to make medicine out of black people's blood. So
so when about was, is this still a current belief, or when did this start around?
It probably started during the colonial period.
Right.
Because I know that I found a story, I used it in one of my books where I was talking about this, where the story was at least being told after World War I. And I would not discount it as possibly still being told. There are some very interesting beliefs that are still in circulation. And remember, in Atlanta in the 1970s, a very similar story was being told.
Yeah.
So it's not those people over there.
Yeah.
It's us right here.
Sure.
We believe these things. And it's part of our living folklore.
Well, and it's our history. Like you said, it's
our history,
it's
yes.
the history of the strange. We have so much of it. I mean, even going to like the freak shows that used to travel all around the United States, and that is a big part of our history.
The carnival is kind of like a freak show in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And it's a friend of mine actually has a theory that the freak shows might have played a part in some cryptozoology beliefs, because freak shows would often have these dried monsters that there was a guy named Homer Tate out in Arizona who used to make these monsters and sell them to freak shows. And so there would be things like wolf boys and, just these creatures, little mummies and things like that.
They have them bottled and,
bottled and in little coffins with a blue light on them. And he thinks that they might have had something to do with inspiring some local monster beliefs. He's never been able to prove it, but he can't help but think that they must have had some influence, because, this was a big entertainment for a lot of people living, especially out in rural areas.
Yeah, absolutely. They'd come from miles around to see all this stuff.
Of course, yeah. And that's not even to mention the living performers who would sell these little pamphlets where they would, where they would tell these stories about how, that this person was found in the jungles of Africa and 20 people were killed trying to capture them. And it was actually like a little farmer from Des Moines or somebody who had just had a very peculiar appearance. And so he joined the freak show.
Yeah, it was a good job. It had medical benefits.
It was a lot better than living in an institution.
Well, yeah.
They got to travel. They got to see the world. They got to make money.
Yeah.
They often had a chance to marry. It was.
I saw one where one of them actually married and had a child, and unfortunately, I think it was the one that had 4 legs. But, you know, the child didn't make it, and she ended up losing 2. But you're right. They had a life.
They had a real life. And, yes, it was cut off from, society in general. But I think it sounds a lot better than living in an institution your whole life.
Well, and I think, a lot of those traveling shows, they were like a family. So, you travel with people for years. This is your family.
I think again, I know that the people who outlawed these things, they had good intentions, but I don't think it was a good idea. I think they should have just left people alone. They were offended, is what it came down to. No one ever bothered to ask the people who were the performers.
Well, that happened with the little people, like the guy that played Tyrion Lannister. He threw a fit about them, using the little people in these movies, and all of the the dwarfs and the midgets, and they were like, "Hey, these are our roles. We want this."
Yes.
You're taking jobs away from us.
Yes.
Yeah, you kind of stifled all of their careers.
That's right, and it's easy for you to do. You've made it.
Yeah,
you have to earn a living.
Multi-millionaire.
You were in freaking Elf. I mean, come on. Best movie ever.
Kelly likes Christmas movies,
I fire it up around September. It's about Elf time. So we're actually getting into the Halloween time, and that reminds me. We're gonna get Robert to come back. We're hoping to do a complete Halloween deep dive into some lore. We are at our last 2 minutes, unfortunately. I mean, this has flown by. It has been such a wonderful interview. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Anytime you want me back.
Anything you want to plug in our last 2 minutes?
No, really. Just sign up for Historian of the Strange. Buy my books. You can find The Bye-Bye Man or Mrs. Wakeman versus the Antichrist. You can get them all on Amazon. There's another book called The President's Vampire by Christopher Farnsworth. He took my title. That's why
Don't buy that one.
I didn't say that. We have the same publisher. We have the same publisher. So
we want you to buy them all. Don't listen to
We want you to buy Robert Damon Schneck's books, and it's Schneck. So thank you.
CK.
Thank you for coming to the Nighthawk.
Schneck.
Schneck. So this is the Nighthawk on KSCO. Thank you to Robert Damon Schneck for coming on, talking to us about the strange and the history behind it. We will have another episode with you. I think this was wonderful. And we are on Tuesday and Thursdays from 8 to 10 p.m. on KSCO Santa Cruz. We are signing out for the evening, and we'll be back on Tuesday. Anything you want to add, Guinea?
Listen up, listen in, and join us again.
I like that. Thank you, everybody. This is the Nighthawk.
That's all, folks.